The north is cold and full of whispers.
The smell was the first thing. 7 weeks on the road from Starfall, and Ned had forgotten it. Wet ash. Fat gone rancid in the gutters. Something underneath both that the rain had not moved in 4 months and would not move now. The city had burned in places and been put out in places, and the difference between the two was a street. He rode through the Lion Gate at dusk with 6 men, a Dornish wet nurse who had not spoken since Starfall, and a bundle. The bundle had not left his sight since Dorne. It had ridden across his chest through the Boneway, through the marches, through 9 days of Reach country, where every innkeeper wanted to know what a Northman was carrying so carefully, and every Northman with him had learned to say nothing. Ned had slept with one hand on it. He had eaten with one hand on it. Twice on the King's Road he had woken in the dark with his fingers already checking that it was still breathing. Nobody had asked him twice. They took his horse in the outer yard. He would not give them the bundle. The Red Keep was quieter than it had been. Scaffolding stood against the northern wall where a section had come down in the sack. Men were still scrubbing. 4 months and they were still scrubbing, and Ned walked past them and did not look at what they were scrubbing, and his jaw ached by the time he reached the doors. The throne room was empty. That was the thing he would remember. Not the chair. The emptiness. The court had been sent out, all of it, on his own asking, and the hall that had held 500 people the day the crown changed hands now held 1 drunk man and 1 dead king's chair and the sound of Ned's boots. He stopped 15 feet inside the door. There, on the stone. No crimson cloaks, no small shapes laid out where a man could see them from the dice. No blood, they had got the blood, mostly, or the light was kind. But the stone was a different color there than it was anywhere else in the hall, a patch the size of a hearthrug, scrubbed pale where the rest was gray with 400 years of soot. They had cleaned it so hard they had left a mark. Ned's arms tightened. The bundle shifted against him and made a small sound, and he moved, without deciding to, turning his shoulder, putting his body between the sleeping weight and a stain on a floor. "You look like a man who rode here to accuse me of something." Robert was on the steps below the throne. Not on it. He had a cup in one hand, and his crown was on the step beside him like something he had taken off and forgotten, and he was 21 years old, and he had killed a prince in a river and won a kingdom, and he had the face of a man who had not slept since. "Your Grace." "Don't." Robert drank. "Don't do that." "Not you." "I've had 4 months of that." "Robert, better." He gestured at the empty hall with the cup, and wine went over the rim and onto the steps, and he did not notice. "You made me clear my own throne room. Do you know what Jon said when I told him? He said, 'Let him.' He said, 'Ned Stark has never asked you for a thing in his life, so let him have the room.' Ned said nothing. So have it." Robert's eyes went to the bundle, and then away, and then back. "What is that?" "Sit down." "I am sitting." "Sit down and put the cup on the stone." Something in Robert's face changed. He was drunk, and he was grieving, and neither of those had ever made him slow. He set the cup down. Ned crossed the floor. He did not go around the pale patch. He walked over it, because he had decided somewhere in the Boneway that he would not go around it, and he knelt on the second step and folded back the wool. He did not say a word. He had prepared 4 different speeches on the King's Road, and he used none of them. He let Robert look. The child was 2 moons old and asleep. Dark hair. Too much of it. A long face, already, the way northern babes have long faces before they have anything else. Robert Baratheon looked down at him, and his hand came up, and it was not the hand of a man reaching for a weapon. It was the enormous scarred hand of a boy from Storm's End, reaching toward a jaw and a brow and a shape around the eyes that he had last seen at 15 in a courtyard at Harrenhal. His fingers stopped an inch away. "Lyanna," Robert said. "Yes, this is." The hand hung there. "Ned, this is hers." Yes, she had a. And then it arrived. Ned watched it arrive. Watched the arithmetic close in a mind that men said was good for nothing but war, and it took perhaps 3 heartbeats, and Robert's hand was still an inch from the child's face when his mouth found the other half of it. Rhaegar, the hand became a fist. Robert came up off the step. Ned turned his shoulder and rose into him and got his forearm across the king's chest, and the two of them stood there, chest to chest, the child between Ned's body and the man who had won a war to kill his father. "Move, no, Ned, move your arm." No. For a long moment nothing in the hall made any sound. Robert's breathing. That was all. 200 pounds of it, and Ned's boots were sliding a half-inch back on the polished stone, and he did not move his arm. Then Robert stepped back. He went 4 paces and stopped with his back to them, and put both hands on the edge of the dice, and stood like that. His shoulders were shaking. Ned had known him 11 years, and had seen him weep exactly once, on a beach below Gulltown when they were boys. "She asked me," Ned said. Robert did not turn. "In the tower. At the end. She asked me for something, and I gave her my word, and I will not tell you what she asked, tonight or ever, and you will not ask me twice. You will not tell me." Robert's voice had gone flat. She was mine. She was not. Ned said it quietly. She was never anyone's. That was the whole trouble with her, and you loved her anyway, and so did I. The silence stretched. Somewhere far off in the keep a door shut. "He has her face," Robert said at last. "He has her face. And he has mine. And he has my father's. And there is not one thing in him that any man in the 7 kingdoms would look at twice." Ned took a step forward. "That is what I came to say. Look at him. Look properly, Robert." Robert turned around. "Silver hair cannot be hidden. Not in a sceptre, not in Essos, not in a hole in the ground. A silver-haired child is a rumor with legs, and rumors find their way to Casterly Rock inside a year, and then someone helpful puts him in a crimson cloak and lays him on that floor." Ned's voice did not rise. "This one is gray-eyed and dark and long in the face. I can raise him in my own hall, in the coldest corner of the map, in front of 300 of my own men, and every lord who rides through my gate will see a Stark boy at the table and think nothing at all. You want me to let him live. I want you to look at what you have." Ned held the child up slightly, the way a man holds up a document. "You have no son. You have no wife. You are 21 years old, and you sit on a chair with no heir behind it, and every lord who bent the knee this year is already counting the years until you fall off a horse. That is not a kindness I am asking you for. That is a hole in your kingdom, and I have brought you the only thing in Westeros that fills it. He's Rhaegar's. He is Lyanna's. He is." Robert's hand went up and stopped. God's, Ned, and if you take him from me tonight, Ned, let it sit. I will not stop you. You are the king, and I am one man, and I have 6 Northmen in your yard. But I will ride home in the morning, and I will not come back, and every lord from the neck to the wall will know that Eddard Stark rode south with something, and rode north with nothing, and they will wonder for the rest of their lives what it was. He was not threatening him. He was describing it. Robert heard the difference, and it was worse. The king walked to the throne. He did not sit on it. He put one hand on the pommel of a sword some gardener had died holding 3 centuries ago, and he stood looking up into the tangle of it. "I hate this chair," he said. "Did you know that? 4 months. I have hated it every hour of 4 months. I wanted her. I got this." He laughed, and the laugh was awful. I'd have given them the whole realm for 1 hour on the Trident with it going differently. "I know. So let me give it away." Robert turned. His eyes were red and perfectly clear. "You think this is mercy? It isn't. They took her from me and put me on a rock I never asked for, and now I'll hand the rock to the one house I was meant to have ended, and every last one of them can live with it. Tywin Bloody Lannister can live with it. Robert, you'll have him. On my terms." Ned went very still. "Name them. He's Targaryen. In the open. In the light. In the White Book. I'll not have a secret dug up in 20 years and made into a war." Robert counted them off on his fingers, and he was not drunk anymore, not in any way that mattered. Every warden, every great house, they come here and they swear it to my face, and their sons swear it after them. And when the boy is grown, there will be a great council, all 7 kingdoms, in front of witnesses. And it will be settled the way Jaehaerys settled his, and not the way Viserys settled his. Agreed, and one more. Robert's voice cracked. Once you ride home, and you never ask me for anything again. Not one thing. Not ever. Ned looked down at the child. The child slept. Agreed, he said. Neither of them heard the door. Jon Arryn stood in it with the corridor dark behind him. And he had been standing there long enough, and his face held nothing at all. The seating had not changed in 8 years, and Catelyn Stark had not stopped seeing it. Ned at the center of the high table. On his right, the boy. On his left, an empty chair that was hers when she took it, and below the boy, 1 place down and 1 hand span lower where the bench stepped, her son. Robb was 9 now. He had his grandfather's shoulders coming in, and he ate like a soldier, and he had never once, in 8 years, asked why he sat there. That was the part she could not carry. Not the seat. The not asking. She served the fish herself that night because the girl had a burn on her wrist, and she came down the table and set the plate in front of the boy, and he looked up and said, "Thank you, my lady." In the North's own accent, in Ned's own cadence, with gray eyes that were the exact gray of every Stark in the crypt below her feet. "You are welcome, Jon." Her hand did not touch his shoulder. It had not touched his shoulder in 8 years. Not once, not in illness, not in the winter he was 6 and coughed for a month, and she sat up 3 nights running with the maester, because she was the lady of this castle, and that was her duty, and duty is not the same as a hand. He had never noticed. That was the mercy of it. She had been so faultless for so long that the boy thought she was kind. The armor came in the spring, the way it came every spring. 2 crates up from White Harbor, oiled canvas, the crown seal and wax on both of them, and a letter from a master armorer in King's Landing, regretting that the measurements were a guess, and asking the prince's steward to send truer ones for next year. Gray plate. Northern gray, honest gray, mail beneath it and the boiled leather straps of a boy's practice harness, and on the gorget, on the buckles, along the edge where the pauldron met the chest, gold. Not much. A thread of it. You would have to stand close. Catelyn stood close. She had watched Roderick Castle unpack the first set when the boy was 5, and she had understood the entire arrangement in 1 second, and had never needed it explained to her again. Ned could raise him as a Stark. Ned could seat him in Winterfell, and put him in grey, and teach him to say "my lady" to a woman who wished he had never been born. It changed nothing. Every spring, from 1,000 miles away, a man on a chair took his measure and sent him gold. Robb's mail was Robb's father's, cut down twice. She had the crates carried up, and she thanked the steward, and she went and sat in the sept for an hour, and prayed to the mother for a patience she had been asking for since 283, and had not yet been given. In the yard they were drilling. She stopped on the covered walk above it, out of the wind, and watched the way she watched most mornings, without appearing to. Roderick Cassel had Robb and Theon Greyjoy paired off at the far end with blunts, and he was letting them go, correcting nothing, the way you let boys run. The boy he had by the elbow at the near end he was not letting go at all. Again, sir. Again. You had him. Now he's on his knees in front of you with his sword on the ground. What do? Take his surrender. Whose? Jon stopped. He was 8 years old and holding a blunted arming sword that was too heavy for him, and he stopped and thought about it, and Catelyn watched him think, and hated how visible it was, how much like Ned it was. That particular stillness that meant something was being weighed properly. His lord's, Jon said. Not his. He can't give me anything. His lord can. And if his lord's dead in the field, then there's nobody to give it, and I have to decide what he's worth. So, decide. I don't know yet. Then you hang him or you feed him, and either way you pay for it. Roderick let go of the elbow. Again, no footwork. No wrist work. Nothing about the sword at all. Catelyn looked along the walk, and found Ned 20 feet away at the corner of the wall with his hands on the parapet, watching the same yard, saying nothing. He had been standing there long enough that the snow on his shoulders had gone to water. He was not making a swordsman. Roderick was not making a swordsman. Nobody in this castle was making a swordsman. She went inside. The thing she saw at midwinter was worse than the armor, and she could not explain to anyone why. The two of them came through the inner gate off the hunt in the blue hour, cold, burned, and loud, the way boys come home. Jon first, Robb half a step behind him, and to the left. Catelyn stopped in the middle of the yard with a lamp in her hand, half a step behind, and to the left off the shield side, where a sworn man walks so that his own arm is free. Nobody had taught them that. She would have known. She ran this castle down to the salt in the kitchens, and if Roderick Castle or Ned Stark or any master-at-arms had drilled her firstborn into walking a guardsman's line, she would have heard it inside a day. They had arranged themselves. Somewhere in 8 years of hunting and yard work and sleeping in each other's rooms when it stormed. The two of them had settled it between them without a word being spoken by anyone, and her son had taken the position and did not know he had taken it, and was happy. Mother, Robb was grinning. 4 hairs and Jon fell in the stream. I did not fall in the stream, he fell in the stream. She said something. She did not afterward remember what. It was the correct thing, because it was always the correct thing. Ned took the boy down to the crypts in the last week of the year and did not tell her he was doing it. She found out from a torch missing from the bracket. She went as far as the steps. They were down there a long time. When they came up, Jon's face had the raw look of a child who has been holding something in his throat. And Ned's hand was on the back of his neck, and neither of them was speaking. She learned later, from Ned, in bed, in the dark, in the only place he ever said anything he had not decided in advance to say, that he had shown the boy his mother's statue and had said nothing whatsoever about her. Nothing? He didn't ask. Ned. He stood there. Ned's voice, in the dark. He stood there, and he put his hand on the stone, and he stood there. What was I going to say to him, Cat? Anything I said would have been smaller than it. In autumn, the boy wrote a letter. Maester Luwin brought it to Ned in the Solar, because a raven going to Castle Black was a raven going to the wall, and Luwin was a careful man. Catelyn was at the window with the accounts, and she did not look up, and she heard every word. He wrote it himself, my lord. I have not corrected it. To whom? Maester Aemon. Ned did not say anything for a moment. What does he want with Aemon? He asks whether it is true that a Targaryen was offered a crown and said no. Luwin cleared his throat. He asks how he did it, whether it was hard. Catelyn's quill stopped. He's 8. He is, my lord. The pause went on. Then, send it. My lord, send it, Luwin, and whatever comes back, bring it to him, and not to me. She watched the bird go from the window an hour later, black against a white sky, north. She did not know what was in it. She would not know for years. She only knew that something had left her house going north, and that nobody in her house had asked her leave. The truth came for her at 3 a.m, the way it always did. Ned, asleep. The fire down to coals. Catelyn Stark lying on her back in the dark with her eyes open, doing the thing she had not permitted herself in daylight for 8 years, which was to finish the thought. She had told herself it was fear for her children. That was the version that let her sleep. A Targaryen boy raised in her hall, decreed and oathed and sent gold from the capital. A boy who would one day sit on that chair and remember every slight. Of course she was afraid. Any mother would be. She had built an entire architecture out of it, and she had lived inside it comfortably. It was not that. She turned her face into the pillow and made herself say it in her own head, in words, all the way to the end. He would be good to them. That was the fear. Not that he would put Robb below the salt or marry Sansa off to some Wretchman for grain or forget Arya's name. That he would not. That he would raise her son up and give him the north and call him brother in front of the whole realm. Generously, warmly, entirely meaning it, and that Robb would be given his own inheritance as a gift by Lyanna Stark's son, and would be glad, and would love him for it, and that she would spend the rest of her life saying thank you. She lay in the dark with a hand pressed flat over her mouth until it passed. 7 years went the way years go in the north, which is quietly and then all at once. The raven came from the south in the spring, and it was not from Castle Black. Luwin brought it to the high table at breakfast, which meant it was not a thing to be read in a solar. Ned broke the seal, gold wax, a crowned stag, and read it standing. He read it twice. "Cat, what is it?" "The king is coming to Winterfell." He was still looking at the parchment. "The whole court. He's on the road already." Down the table, Robb's head came up. Beside him, the boy had not moved at all. "Why?" Catelyn said. Ned set the letter on the table. "The prince turned 16 this year," he said. He saw the wheelhouse before he saw a single banner. It came up out of the folds of the King's Road 2 miles south, a gray box the size of a granary, and it was crawling. Everything behind it was crawling too. Outriders had peeled off half a mile back and were sitting their horses on the high ground doing nothing, and Jon understood why. They had nowhere to go. They could not ride ahead of the thing, and they could not fall behind it, so 80 of the best horsemen in Westeros were standing in a field, waiting for a wagon. He counted anyway. 14 wagons in the tail. Say 1,600 pounds of usable load each. He put the column at 1,000 souls, called it 1,200 horse, including the remounts and the draft teams, and did the sum he had been doing since Roderick first made him do it over a plate of cold beef when he was 11. 15,000 pounds a day, 10 wagons to carry a single day of it. They were carrying 9 days. 10 at the outside, which meant every mile of the last 10 weeks, that column had been eating out of somebody's granary, and every lord from the Trident to the Neck had opened his stores for a king he could not refuse, and had smiled while he did it. "You're counting." Robb came up on the wall beside him, out of breath from the stair. "I'm counting." "It's the king, Jon. It's 1,000 people who have to eat tonight, and my lady mother has been buying oats since the letter came." Jon leaned on the parapet. "Look at the wheelhouse." "I am looking at the wheelhouse. It's taken 10 weeks to come a road that a rider does in 5. That's not a progress. That's a siege engine going for a walk." Robb laughed. Then he stopped laughing, because the front of the column had reached the tree line and the banners had come up, and there it was, the crowned stag on gold, and beside it, the same height, the lion. Neither of them said anything about that. The yard filled, and then it kept filling. Jon stood at Ned's right hand in front of the great keep, with 300 people at his back, and the snow trodden to brown slush under 600 hooves, and when the king dismounted, the whole of Winterfell went down on one knee like a field going over in wind. Robert Baratheon was enormous. Not tall, Ned was nearly as tall. Wide, he had gone to fat in a way that had eaten the man underneath it and left the shoulders behind as evidence, and he came across that yard breathing hard through his mouth, and he took Ned by the arms and did not say a word for a moment. "You've got fat," Ned said. "I've got fat." Robert's grin split his face. "You've got gray. 9 years, you cold bastard. 9 years. Then he turned. Jon rose when Ned's hand touched his shoulder, which was the signal, which had been agreed with Maester Luwin 4 days ago in a solar with a diagram on the table, because nobody in the castle had known how a prince greets a king who is not his father in a yard that is not his court. Robert Baratheon looked at him. The yard was silent. 600 people and 1,000 horses, and none of it made a sound, and the king of the 7 kingdoms stood in front of the boy he had decreed heir to his throne 15 years ago, and looked at him the way a man looks into a well. "Gods be good," Robert said. "You've got her face. 15 years. Jon had rehearsed 9 different answers. Every one of them had assumed the king would say something to him. "Your Grace," he said. Her mouth. Her. Robert's hand came up toward his jaw, and stopped, exactly the way it had stopped once before in a throne room, and Jon did not know that, and never would. Ned, look at him. I've been looking at him 15 years, Robert." The hand dropped. The king cleared his throat, hard, and was suddenly and violently jovial. "Well, you've the north in you and no mistake. Where's your crypt? I want to see her before I eat anything." He walked off toward the guest hall without waiting for anyone. Jon stood where he was. Beside him, half a step behind and to the left, Robb had not moved either. The crypt was cold enough to hurt. Robert went down the steps too fast for a man his size, and stopped in front of her statue and put a hand on the stone, and Jon stood 8 feet back with a torch he had not been asked to carry, because Ned had put it in his hand at the top of the stair and told him to come. 15 years, Robert said. You'd think it'd fade. Nobody answered him. I killed him for her. Did they tell you that, boy? Right through the chest, in the water, and all his rubies came off him and went down river, and men were still picking them out of the mud a year later. He was talking to the statue. I dream about it. Not the killing. Killing him was the only good hour I've had. I dream I get to do it again. Ned said, Robert. He took her and he put her in a tower, and he got a child on her, and she died of it. And every singer in this realm calls it a love story. Robert's voice went thick. I'd bring him back. I'd bring him back so I could do it slower. Jon did not move. He did not move, and he did not speak, and he held the torch level, and the wax ran down over his knuckles and burned there, and he let it, because the alternative was to put it down, and putting it down would have been a sentence. He looked at his mother's face in the stone and thought, with a clarity that frightened him, that both of the men in this crypt had loved her, and neither of them had ever asked her anything. "I," Robert said at last. He pushed himself off the plinth. Well, he came back down the row of pillars and stopped in front of Jon and looked at the torch, and then at Jon's hand. And something behind his eyes shifted very slightly. You didn't say anything. No, Your Grace. Why not? Because you weren't finished. Robert stared at him. Then he went up the stairs. Ned waited until the boots had gone. He took the torch out of Jon's hand and turned it and looked at the wax on his knuckles and said nothing at all, and put a hand flat on the back of Jon's neck for a moment. And then that was over too. The feast was a problem in geometry, and the steward had been sick with it for a week. Where does a Targaryen prince, decreed heir apparent by royal seal, sit in relation to Joffrey Baratheon, the king's eldest true-born son? The answer was not a matter of preference. It was a matter of precedence, and precedence in the Seven Kingdoms is arithmetic. And Vaon Poole had done the arithmetic 4 times, and come out with the same result, and had gone to Maester Luwin twice, hoping to be told he was wrong. Jon sat at the high table, 2 places from the king. Joffrey sat at the second table, at the head of it, with his mother. Not below the salt. Not slighted. Perfectly, exactly, correctly seated for the eldest son of a king who is not the heir. And every lord in that hall could read a table the way a maester reads a chain, and by the fish course the whole room had understood the arrangement, and nobody had said one word out loud. Joffrey understood it around the same time. Jon watched him work it out, the head turning, the count along the high table, the second count, and watched the color come up his neck, and watched him turn and say something to his mother with his teeth showing. Ghost lay under the table with his chin on Jon's boot and did not move all night. The queen laughed at everything. Jon ate and watched her do it. She laughed at Robert's stories, which were not funny, and she touched Ned's arm twice, and she asked Lady Catelyn about the sept with an interest so warm it could have heated the room. She did not look at Jon once. That was the thing. 15 years of being looked at by every visiting lord, every merchant, every mummers' troupe that came through the gates. And here was the only person in the hall who had not turned her head. But her eyes kept going to the third table, to the fourth, to the doorway where the Manderley men stood. And Jon realized, halfway through the venison, what she was actually doing. She was not avoiding him. She was watching the room watch him. She was counting faces and measuring how long each one lingered. The way a man counts wagons. She was doing the same sum he had done on the wall that morning, just with a different cargo. Renly Baratheon found him by the fire after the tables were cleared, with a cup in each hand, and gave him one. Cousin, may I say cousin? Nobody has decided what we are, and I refuse to wait for the heralds. You may say it. Good. Renly was 21 and beautiful and entirely at ease. I've a question I've wanted to ask for 13 years, and I've had 4 cups, which is the correct number for it. Have you seen it? Seen what? Summerhall, he said it lightly. Your seat. Prince of Summerhall. Have you ever stood in it? No, no. Renly drank, smiling. You should. It's remarkable. Black stone mostly, and a great deal of grass growing where the hall was. My brother gave me Storm's End when I was 8, and I rode out to look at all of it. Every foot, the way you do, and there's a piece in the north of it that isn't mine. Never has been. Burnt-out castle and about 9,000 acres of it, and my steward puts it in the ledger every year under a heading that just says the crowns. Jon did not answer. He gave you a ruin, Renly said, still smiling, out of my inheritance. I've often wondered which half of that was meant to be the insult. He clapped Jon on the shoulder, warmly, in front of 40 people. Sleep well, cousin, that was well done. Tyrion Lannister had been at the end of the bench for some time, and Jon had not seen him arrive. Was it? You didn't answer him, which was the only answer. He'll tell it as a triumph anyway. Tyrion swirled his cup. May I offer you the single piece of advice I have that's worth anything? You'll be offered a great deal of it in the next year. Most of it from men who want something. What do you want? To be spoken to like a man, rather than a curiosity. You've done it twice tonight without noticing, which is why I'm still sitting here. He looked up. Here it is. Whatever they call you, Dragon Spawn, the Stark King, the Northern Bastard, whichever one gets fashionable, wear it. Say it first. Say it louder. Say it before breakfast. A thing you carry openly is armor. A thing you hide is a wound, and they will find it and they will put a finger in it every day for the rest of your life. Jon turned that over. That's good advice. It is. It cost me every year I've had. Tyrion set down his cup. And then, without any change in his voice at all, may I ask you something unpleasant? Yes. Have you ever met a single living person who saw your father and mother married? Not heard of one. Met one. The fire popped. No, Jon said. No, said Tyrion Lannister, and got down off the bench and went to bed. Ned came to his room past midnight, still in his feast clothes. We leave in a fortnight, he said. Robert wants us south before the year turns. There's to be a council in the spring, the whole realm, all 7 kingdoms, to settle it in front of witnesses. He stood in the doorway. 15 years I've been telling you about that council. It's a real thing now. Get some sleep. Jon slept badly and woke before dawn and could not say why. Outside, in the blue dark on the far side of the yard, a boy was climbing the broken tower. 3 children, 1 chair, 1 boy. Cersei Lannister had been doing that sum for 14 years, and it had always come out the same, and it had never once mattered, because for 14 years the boy had been a name in a decree filed in a room in the Red Keep that nobody ever went into. A line of ink. She had learned to walk past it the way you walk past a crack in a wall. Then she had stood in a frozen yard yesterday and watched him rise when Ned Stark touched his shoulder. He was not ink. He was a lean, gray-eyed thing with her dead rival's face and a direwolf under the table and a household that had been quietly assembling itself around him since before Joffrey was born. And he was 15 years old, and he was going to outlive her. She had not slept. She dressed at first light and stood at the narrow window of the guest tower with her hands on the sill and did the arithmetic properly. For the first time, all the way to the bottom. Joffrey inherits nothing. Tommen inherits nothing. Myrcella marries whatever the boy sells her to. And when the Northern King sits the throne and looks at the family that held it before him, the family that put the last Targaryen children on the floor in front of his uncle, what precisely does he do with 3 golden-haired Baratheons who are not Baratheons at all? Gold their crowns and gold their shrouds. She pushed it away. She had pushed it away for 20 years, and she pushed it away now, and her hands were cold on the stone. You were awake early. Jaime was in the doorway with his sword belt over his shoulder, unshaven, cheerful. He had slept. Of course he had slept. Shut the door. He shut it. I want you to look at what is happening in this castle. I've looked. It's cold, and the beer is bad. Jaime, he set the belt down. All right. That boy walks into the Red Keep in 3 months, and he is invested before the court, and after that, every man who takes a knee is taking it to him." She kept her voice level. "Our father spent 30 years buying that chair. He bought it with the reins, and he bought it with a marriage, and he bought it with 2 dead children on a stone floor. And now Robert is going to hand it to Rhaegar's son and call it a gift to a dead girl. Yes? Yes? He's not wrong that it's Robert's to give." Jaime shrugged one shoulder. "There's no law about any of it. There never was. Our children aren't his." He said it flatly, in a guest room with a door between them and the world, the way he had said it perhaps 6 times in 14 years. "That's the actual problem, Cersei, and it isn't the boy." She crossed the room and took his face in her hands, which had always worked. "Then help me." "Help you do what?" "Anything. Anything. At all. You have not said one useful word since we crossed the neck." He took her wrists gently and put her hands down. "I stood in that yard yesterday," Jaime said, "and Rhaegar Targaryen's son looked straight through me. He's a child. He'll be told." Something had gone out of his voice. "Someday, some helpful little maester will lean over and tell him exactly who put a sword in his grandfather's back, and I've had 15 years to work out what I'd say, and I still don't have it." He picked up the belt. "And in 3 months I have to kneel to him, sword flat, both hands, in front of the whole court. Kingslayer swearing to the last dragon. Jaime, I need air," he said, and went. She stood alone in the middle of the room and understood that she had lost something, and did not yet know what. She went down to the yard because Joffrey had asked her to come and watch, and Joffrey never asked her to watch anything unless he had already arranged the outcome. He had chosen well. Tourney blades, weighted, not blunts, not the boys' sticks, but the heavy things a man trains with, which favor reach and favor weight. And her son had 4 inches on the northern boy and a Kingsguard's tutelage since he was 6. He had chosen the hour too, mid-morning, the yard full, Robert already drunk and shouting on the wall, half the Winterfell household leaning on the rail. "First blood," Joffrey said, loud enough to carry, "unless the prince would rather use the padded ones." It was neatly done. She was almost proud. The boy took the sword he was offered and weighed it, and did not rise to any of it. "First blood is for hedge knights and drunks," he said. The yard went quiet. "It's a boy's game, and I'll not play it in front of the king." He said it pleasantly. He said it the way you correct a steward. "Yields. 3 of them. And I'll take my left hand." Cersei's fingers closed on the rail, because it could not be refused. That was the exquisite part. First blood was beneath a prince, and Joffrey could not insist on it without announcing to 200 people that he preferred the boy's game, and he could not object to the left hand without saying, out loud, in front of his father, that he needed the advantage. Her son stood in the middle of the yard with his mouth open and nothing to put in it. "Yields then," he said. He lost the first inside 20 seconds. She watched it happen with a coldness spreading behind her ribs. It was not that the northern boy was faster. He was not particularly fast. He simply did not do anything Joffrey expected. He gave ground, gave more ground. Let Joffrey chase him into the churned mud by the well where the footing was gone, and then took 2 steps to the side and put the flat of the weighted blade against her son's ribs hard enough to fold him. "Yield," Jon said. Joffrey yielded. The second took longer and was worse to watch, because by then Joffrey was angry, and Robert was bellowing something from the wall. And every guardsman on that rail had stopped pretending to be polite. Then, in the third, the northern boy made a mistake. Cersei saw it. He overreached on a low cut, the left hand betraying him, the shoulder opening, and Joffrey got inside it and hammered the crossguard into his forearm, and the sword went into the mud, and Joffrey had the point at his throat, and the yard erupted. "Yield," Joffrey said, shrill with it. "I yield." Robert was roaring. Someone threw a cap. And Cersei Lannister stood at the rail with her hands perfectly still, and watched Sir Roderick Castle, 40 feet away, look at Jon Targaryen, and give the smallest shake of his head, the specific disappointment of an old master-at-arms who has just watched his student give something away on purpose. She looked back at the mud. The overreach had been too wide. The shoulder had opened too far. It was the mistake of a boy who had never once made that mistake in the first 2 bouts. He had let her son have it. In front of the king, in front of the North, in front of the men who would follow one of them one day, and he had done it so well that only 2 people in that yard had seen it. And one of them was her, and the other was an old man with white whiskers who was already looking away. Joffrey was crowing. He would tell this story for a year. Her son would tell this story for a year. She turned from the rail and walked into the keep and did not trust herself to speak to anyone until the shaking stopped. She found Ned Stark alone in the godswood at dusk, which was where he always was, because the man was as predictable as a tide. "Lord Stark, forgive me. I've been trying to find an hour to thank you." "For what, your grace?" "For raising him." She let the pause sit exactly long enough. "I don't think anyone has said it to you. My husband certainly won't. 15 years of another man's son at your table, and a lady of Riverrun making room for him, and not a whisper out of this castle in all that time. That is not a small thing." He inclined his head. He said nothing. He was so easy she could have wept. "It must have been a comfort," she said, "to have someone to tell." "My lady?" "To share it with." "The proof." She turned her face up to the red leaves, mild as milk. "Jon Arryn, I suppose, or the Septon who witnessed the marriage. Is he still living? Robert always says he was a Riverlands man. I confess I've never known his name. He died in the war." "Ah," she let it land softly. "And the record of it? Robert's decree makes such a point of it, the lawful son of Prince Rhaegar and Lady Lyanna, and I've read it. My lord, more than once, and it has always struck me that it says so and never once says who saw it." Ned Stark had gone very still. "My sister told me herself," he said. "Of course she did, on her deathbed. I don't doubt you." Cersei smiled at him with real warmth, because she felt it. "I have never once doubted you, Lord Stark. That's rather the trouble, isn't it? 15 years and every soul in the 7 kingdoms who believes that boy is Rhaegar Targaryen's true-born heir believes it because Eddard Stark says so. Not one witness, not one paper, not one living Septon. There was a woman," Ned said, "a wet nurse out of Starfall who carried him to King's Landing at my side. A Dornish servant." Cersei's smile did not move at all. How reassuring. "And where is she now?" He did not answer, because he did not know, because he had sent her home with silver in 284 and had never once asked after her again. "You'll forgive an anxious mother for wondering aloud," Cersei said, gathering her skirts. "It seems the sort of question a great council might ask. I would hate for you to hear it there for the first time." She left him in the godswood under the tree with the face on it. She had not lied once. That was the craft of it. She had asked a question that had no good answer and left it in a hall full of servants, and by the time the kitchens closed a scullion had said to a stable-boy that Lord Stark's own men couldn't say who the boy's mother lay with, and by midnight the stable-boy had improved on it. And by morning there was a version in the laundry that put Lyanna Stark and her brother in that tower alone for a year. Cersei never touched it again. She never needed to. She was in the broken tower. That was the hour of the day she permitted herself, in a castle that had no privacy and no locks worth the name, the roofless place at the top of the abandoned keep where the old windows were, and the wind came through, and nobody had climbed in 20 years. Jaime was still pulling his shirt down when the boy's face appeared in the window. 10 years old. Hands white on the stone. Nothing in his expression but the flat, unbearable arithmetic of a child who has understood something. "He saw us," Cersei said. She was already moving toward the stair when Jaime crossed the room behind her. She heard the words. Only the last of them, from 4 steps down, going away, "The things I do for love," and then the sound. Not a long sound. That was the part she carried. She went down the tower stair at a walk, not a run, a walk, with her skirts in one hand, and she came out into the covered gallery on the far side of the yard, and had crossed 40 feet of it when the first scream went up behind her, and she stopped and stood absolutely still with her hand on the rail, and let 3 full seconds pass in which she made her face into what it needed to be. Then she was moving with everyone else, gathering her skirts, calling for a maester, being flawless. Below the broken tower there was a crowd around something small on the flagstones, and Catelyn Stark was on her knees in the middle of it. Heir came out of the crowd. He did not look at her. Later, when the boy had been carried in and the maester had said the word breathing and the word broken, and refused to say any word after that, Cersei stood at the window of the guest tower and watched a raven go up from the rookery toward the south. And in the yard below, in the last of the light, the northern boy was carrying a chest of Bran Stark's things into the keep because someone had asked him to, and he had not thought to send a servant. She watched him do it. 3 children, 1 chair, 1 boy. By the 4th day Jon could tell how the day would go by the sound the wheelhouse made on the first hill. If it went over clean, they might make 18 miles. If it hung, that long grinding note, iron on stone, and then the shouting, they would make 11, and the tale would still be coming into camp 2 hours after the king had eaten. It hung most mornings. The causeway at Moat Cailin took 4 days. He rode out from the column on the 2nd of them, and sat his horse in the reeds looking up at the 3 towers that were left of 20, the gatehouse and the drunkards and the children's, black basalt going green at the bases, and did the sum without being asked to. 300 spears. That was all. 300 men who did not mind wet feet, and the whole of the north was shut behind them. And no army had ever come up that road and got through. Then, the neck itself, and 8 days of a road that was mostly water, and lizard lions on the banks, and flies that got in behind a man's collar and stayed there. He rode back along the column most afternoons, because there was nothing else to do with the hours. 1,000 people strung out over 3 miles of causeway. And the front of it was banners and hunting horns and the smell of Robert's breakfast, and the back of it was what it actually was. Draft teams standing in their own steam, a wheelwright arguing with a carter about a hub, 200 servants walking because there was no room for them to ride, and one of them, a girl of maybe 12, carrying a hamper the whole way because it had been given to her at Winterfell and nobody had ever told her to put it down. Ghost paced him in the ditch, in and out of the alders, white against black mud. This was the realm. Not the throne room, not the small council, not the decree in the White Book. This, 12 miles a day, and a wagon that ate 10 days of everyone's grain to move one absurd box, and a girl with a hamper. He said as much to Tyrion Lannister at a ford, and Tyrion looked at him for a moment and said that if he ever repeated it in front of a Tyrell he would be married inside the year. He turned 16 at a wayside camp south of the Neck, in rain, in a tent that leaked. Nobody knew. He had not told anyone, and Robb was 800 miles north, and there was no reason for anyone in that column to have the date, and Jon sat on a camp stool in the wet, and pulled off his boots, and found that he did not mind as much as he had expected to. Ned came in at moonrise with 2 cups and a wineskin, and did not mention it either. They talked about the road. Whether the Ruby Ford would be up, whether Moat Cailin's towers would still be standing when Jon's own sons came south, and what a man would need to hold that causeway with 300 spears, and Jon said what he would need, and Ned made him say it twice, and then took the second answer apart. Then Ned stood and pulled his cloak on, and said, at the flap, without turning round, that the Ledgers from Summerhall had come up from White Harbor and would be at the Trident, and that he wanted them read before King's Landing. He did not say boy. He had said it his whole life. Not tonight. Boy, stand straighter, boy. You're bleeding, boy. 3 or 4 times a day for 16 years, so worn into the shape of his speech that Jon had never once heard it as a word. It was not there. Ned went out into the rain, and Jon sat with the empty cup in both hands, and could not have spoken for anything in the world. The holdfast on the Green Fork was called Rettleford, and its lord was hunting. That was the answer they got at the gate, and the answer they got in the yard, and the answer the steward gave Ned Stark standing in the hall, with his hat in his hands and his eyes wet with apology. His lordship was hunting, had been these 10 days, might be a fortnight more. And the granaries, well, the harvest had been poor. Rats in the west store. His lordship would be sick to hear it. Jon stood at Ned's shoulder and watched a man tell 4 lies in a row without once looking away, and understood 2 things at the same time. The first was that Rettleford flew a red field with a mill wheel on it, and that the mill wheel was quartered, and that the quartering was Lannister. The second was that they had 7 days of grain and 11 days of road. "Take it," Robert said, when it came to him. He was in the yard with a boot off. "Take the lot and hang that greasy little man off his own gate, and I'll write his lordship a letter about rats." "You will not," Ned said. "I'm the king, Ned. You're a king with 1,000 mouths and 400 miles of riverlands to cross, and if the word runs ahead of us that we hang stewards, every granary between here and the crossroads will burn before we reach it." Ned's voice never went up. "We pay. Above the price. It costs a week. A week. A week." Jon said, "There's a third thing." Both of them looked at him. He had not planned to speak. He had the crown's ledgers on a mule 200 yards away because Ned had made him read them in the rain since Moat Cailin. And he had read the Riverlands rolls twice on the theory that no one else in the column had, and it turned out no one else in the column had. "Rettleford owes the crown 11 years of back taxes," he said. "It's in the rolls. Nobody's collected them since Jon Arryn stopped coming north. 11 years, with the arrears, comes to more than that man has ever seen in one place." Robert stared at him. "So dun him for it." "No." Jon turned to the steward, who had come out to the top of the steps. "I'll forgive it." The yard went quiet in a particular way. All of it. 11 years, struck out, in writing, sealed, tonight, and a copy for your lord's own chest so he can put it on his wall. He came up 2 steps. "And against that forgiveness I'll ask a favor of the house. Grain, whatever the West Store can spare after the rats, at a fair reckoning, entered as a gift to the crown." The steward's mouth worked. "You may tell his lordship," Jon said, "that his prince came to his gate and found him hunting, and forgave his debt anyway, and asked him for bread like a guest. Say it exactly like that. He'll want to have it said exactly like that." There was a long moment. Then the man went at a run for the keys to the West Store, which was not empty, and had never been empty, and yielded 11 days of grain before midnight. Robert laughed at him for it in the tent afterwards, laughed until he choked, said the boy had been raised by ledger keepers, said that when he was 16 he'd have taken it with a hammer. Ned did not laugh, and Tyrion Lannister, who had watched the whole thing from a mounting block with a cup in his hand, came past Jon's shoulder on his way out and said 6 words, quietly. "You made him the hero." Well done. Jon wrote the Lord's name in the back of the ledger before he slept, not because he meant to punish him, because a man who starves a king politely will do it again. And next time, it might matter. They came to the Ruby Ford at midday with the sun on it. Jon took his horse down into the water and stopped in the middle of it, and let the column go past him on both sides. It came up over his boots. It was very cold and moving fast, and the stones on the bottom were round and pale, and there was nothing there at all. No marker, no cairn. Nothing but a river crossing that 100 wagons a year go over without knowing. Somewhere under his horse's feet, 15 years ago, a man had gone down in the water, and his rubies had come off him and gone down river. Behind him, on the bank, Robert Baratheon was laughing at something. Jon sat in the ford until his feet went numb inside the boots, and his face gave nothing to anyone. And then he rode up the southern bank and did not look back at it. The other thing happened 3 days later, on the riverbank below the ford, and it happened fast. Arya and the butcher's boy in the shallows with sticks, Joffrey with a sword and wine in him, a word, then a shove, then blood on a highborn wrist, and a direwolf in the reeds. And by the time Jon got down there through the trees, the whole thing had already gone past the point where anyone could take it back. It went to the king in a hall at Derry that night, and it went badly, and it went badly for a full hour. The butcher's boy was already dead. The hound had ridden him down on the road before anyone thought to ask a question. But when Cersei Lannister stood up in that hall and said the word direwolf and the word savage and asked for the Stark girl's beast to answer for her son's wrist, she was not arguing with Eddard Stark of Winterfell. She was arguing with the heir to the Iron Throne, standing at the king's right hand, who had grown up in a castle where 6 of those animals were whelped, and knew precisely what a wolf does when a child is threatened, and who said so, calmly at length, with the girl's own account and the tavern boys and 2 guardsmen's, in the order that made them agree. Robert wanted it finished. Robert wanted his supper. Robert ruled for the wolf. Cersei's face did not move at all. She thanked her husband for his wisdom. She sat down. She looked, for 1/2 second, across the hall at Jon Targaryen. Sansa's wolf lived. Nobody's wolf died on the Trident. It was the first thing Cersei Lannister had lost in public since the day she was crowned, and she carried it south with her the whole way. The Crossroads Inn was 4 nights after Derry, and the knife came there. It was nothing. That was the thing nobody warned you about. It was nothing at all. A man in a brown cloak in a passage between the stable and the yard, and bad light, and Jon had his hands full of a saddle and was thinking about grain. Ghost hit the man before Jon had finished turning round. He heard it more than saw it. A sound like a sack coming off a cart, and a scream that stopped halfway, and then he was on his back in the straw with the saddle across his legs and no memory of falling, and there was blood on the wall at the height of his own chest. The knife was in the mud, 18 inches from his hand. Men came. Someone was shouting for the Kingsguard. Ghost stood over the thing in the brown cloak, with his muzzle red to the eyes, and did not make a sound, and Jon got up on his elbows and found that his arms were shaking so badly he could not push himself off the ground. The man lived. His right arm did not. "Bring him inside," Jon said. His voice came out wrong. "Bring him in and put him by the fire and get the maester, and don't let anyone near him. Not anyone. He talks to me. He'll hang," Robert said. In the yard, 10 minutes later, in his nightshirt, with a hammer in his hand. "He'll answer first. He put steel at my heir on my own road, and in a week we'll know who paid him, and in a year we'll know who paid the man who paid him." Jon heard himself say it, and could not stop. "Give me 3 days. Give me 1. Let the maester keep him alive, and I will hang him." They hanged him from the inn sign before supper, in front of 200 men, because that is what a king's justice looks like. And it looked like something. It looked like the crown answering. Every soldier in the yard stood straighter for it. Jon watched a name he needed die at the end of a rope, and stood there with his hands behind his back so nobody could see them. He never did learn who sent the man. He never learned in his whole life. They smelled the city 3 miles out. It came on the wind before anything of it was visible, a hot brown weight in the back of the throat, smoke and fish and 500,000 people. And then the road turned, and there it was on its hills above the bay, gold and filthy in the afternoon, with the black water running past it out to the sea. Ned had reined up beside him without a word. "The last time I rode through that gate," Ned said. He stopped. He sat looking at the walls for a while, and then he touched his heels to his horse and went on down toward the city. And he did not finish it. They crowned him Aegon, 6th of his name, on the 9th day of the 2nd moon. He had known it was coming since he was 9 years old. Maester Luwin had explained it in a room in Winterfell, with a book open on the table, that a king takes the name of the house he rules, that there had been 5 Aegons, and there would be a 6th. That Jon was a name for a boy, and Aegon was a name for a reign. He had understood it. He had thought about it perhaps 4 times in 7 years. He had never once thought about the last time. It came in the great sept, in the noise, after the crown had gone on, and the roar had gone up, and the septons were still singing, a voice from somewhere back in the crowd. Up on the left where the northern party had been put. Jon, just that. Robb, 3/4 drowned in 800 people, saying his name the way he had said it in a yard at Winterfell for 16 years. Once, because he could not help himself, and because he had worked out faster than anyone in that sept what was actually happening. Nobody else heard it. Within a fortnight, everyone in the Red Keep called him Your Grace. Within a month, the servants had stopped stumbling over it. He asked 3 people to keep to Jon, asked them plainly, twice, and they said, of course, Your Grace, and did it for 4 days, and then stopped. And there was no cruelty in it anywhere. It simply went. It went the way a path goes when nobody walks it. Ned still used it. Robb used it, Arya used it constantly and loudly and in front of ambassadors. That was the whole list, and it never got longer. He remembered almost nothing of the ceremony afterward, except who was not there. No Tywin Lannister. The Warden of the West sent his brother Kevan, who was courteous, and who spoke for nobody, and who left before the feast. No Stannis. Dragonstone sent nothing at all. Not a man, not a letter, not an excuse, which is the loudest thing a lord can send. Highgarden sent Sir Garland Tyrell and 200 men and a great deal of very good wine, and Sir Garland smiled through the whole of it, and had no authority to commit his father to a single thing, and said so cheerfully when asked. Observers, that was the word for it, and Jon learned it that week. Half the realm had sent observers instead of oaths, men with the rank to be seen and no power to bind, present at a coronation the way a man stands at the rail of a ship, watching weather. They were all waiting for the same thing. Nobody said it out loud. There was to have been a great council in the spring, all 7 kingdoms. Witnesses, ratification on the Jaehaerys model, the third lock in the thing Ned Stark had built in 283. Robert had died before it could be summoned. The council had not been held. The throne cut him the first time he sat on it. Not badly. He came down onto it too fast, thinking about something else, and a spur of black steel took the meat under his left thumb, and he did not notice. Not then. Because there were 200 people in the hall, and a Braavosi envoy talking about interest. He found it that evening, in the small council chamber, in the middle of a discussion about grain reserves in the Crown lands. Blood dried brown in the crease of his hand. Old enough to be flaking. He rubbed it off with his thumb while Baelish talked, and nobody saw him do it. They tried the queen and her brother in the throne room on the 2nd day of the 3rd moon. Charges, regicide, by the arrangement of the king's death in the field. The deception of the realm as to the parentage of 3 royal children. Conspiracy against the crown's succession. Jon presided from the chair. Ned stood at the foot of the dais on his left, where a hand stands. The evidence went in over 2 days, and it was not thin. Jon Arryn's inquiry in Jon Arryn's own hand. The book of lineages with 400 years of Baratheon black in it. 9 of Robert's bastards, fetched from 3 castles and a brothel and stood in a row, every one of them dark. Lancel Lannister, who wept and confessed again, and could not stop confessing. Pycelle's letters west, taken from his own chambers, which he explained as the ordinary correspondence of a Grand Maester, and which nobody believed. And Cersei Lannister sitting through all of it with her back straight and her chin level, saying nothing, admitting nothing, looking at him. The court wanted blood. That was the thing Jon had not been ready for. He had expected to have to argue men down. Instead he sat above a hall of lords, who had all lost something in the last war, and who had spent 16 years being governed by that woman's family, and they wanted the sword, and they were not monsters for wanting it, and every single one of their arguments was good. He thought about it for a night. 1. The law is the law, insofar as anything here is law. Regicide is death. Treason is death. A king who spares the people who murdered the last king has told every ambitious man in the realm the price of trying, and the price is nothing, and he will be tested every year until one of them succeeds. Mercy at the beginning is a debt paid by everyone who comes after. 2. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. A king who kills, because it is safer, is a king who will find killing safer next year too, and the year after, and there is a road there that a Targaryen walked in living memory, and men were still scraping the wildfire out of the tunnels a decade later. And there were 3 children in it. He knew what the realm had done the last time there were children in this castle, with the wrong blood in them. He had stood on the stone where they did it. Oberyn Martell had told him, at a table, exactly what those children had been worth in law. He gave the verdicts on the 3rd day. Cersei of House Lannister. Guilty. The hall came up in noise, and he let it, stripped of title, of style, of her jointure, of every honor and holding granted her by her marriage. He waited for the quiet. She keeps her life. She is given to the faith. A mother house in the Vale, under vows, for the rest of it. Someone shouted from the back. Jon did not look at him. She will not see her children again. Cersei Lannister moved for the first time in 3 days. No. It's given. Myrcella is 10 years old and Tommen is 8. She was on her feet. 2 gold cloaks moved, and Jon lifted a hand and stopped them, and let her stand there. You will let me live in a stone room and pray for 40 years, and know they are somewhere in this world being raised by other people. Yes. Kill me. No. Kill me. Her voice cracked all the way open. You have the sword. Everyone in this hall is begging you for it. You would be doing the kind thing, you sanctimonious northern. She stopped. She got her breath. She looked up at him with her eyes streaming and something in her face reassembling into the thing it had been for 32 years. You have done something worse than killing me, Cersei Lannister said, and you are young enough to think it was mercy. She was right. He had known it was true when he chose it, in the dark at the 3rd hour, and he had chosen it anyway, and he would think about that exchange on and off for the rest of his life. Jaime Lannister was brought up in chains, and Jon had the chains taken off before anything was read. Concealment, not regicide. He waited for the hall. There is no evidence that this man arranged the death of Robert Baratheon, and I will not hang a man on a hall's appetite. Then he did the thing. Sir Jaime, why did you kill my grandfather? The whole room stopped. It was not on the roll. Ned's head came round on the dice. Barristan Selmy, standing white and still at the base of the steps, closed his eyes. Jaime Lannister looked up at a boy on the Iron Throne, and something happened in his face that was 16 years old and had never been let out of a room. Nobody's ever asked me that, he said. I'm asking. Not once. Not in 16 years. Your uncle walked into this hall and found me sitting on that chair, and he had the whole of it decided before he opened his mouth. Jaime's voice was not steady. There were caches of wildfire under the Sept of Baelor, under the guild halls, under Fleabottom, under the stables, under half the streets in this city. Rossart made them, and my father was at the gates, and Aerys gave the order, burn them all, and then he told me to bring him my father's head. The hall made a sound Jon had never heard a hall make. So I killed Rossart on the stair, and then I went back and I killed the king. Jaime looked around at 800 people. 500,000. That is what was in the balance, and I have never once said it out loud in this room, because the first man through that door decided what I was, and every man since has agreed with him. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Stripped of the white cloak, Jon said. You broke it. Whatever it bought, you broke it, and I'll not have a Kingsguard who chooses. That's the whole of the vow. Your grace. And you're released. Free to ride. Today, with your horse and your sword and no escort. The hall detonated. Say it, Jon said afterward, in the Tower of the Hand, with the door shut. You know what it is. Say it anyway. Ned Stark put his hands flat on the table. You sent Tywin Lannister's heir home to him with his cloak taken off him in front of 800 people. You didn't pardon him. You discarded him. You told the West that the Kingslayer wasn't worth hanging. He looked up. That was not mercy, and you knew it when you did it, and if you tell me otherwise I'll not believe you. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. Ned nodded slowly. He did not look pleased. He looked like a man watching weather come in over a wall. The rest of it took an hour. Joffrey Baratheon, attainted, disinherited, stripped of the name and the styles, and sent to the wall. Everyone in the room understood what that was. 16 years old, and hated, and given to 300 hard men at the edge of the world in a black cloak with no title in front of it. The boy would not last a year, and there was not a soul in that hall who thought otherwise. Jon did it anyway, and did not dress it up, and did not pretend to himself in the days after that it had been anything but what it was. Myrcella and Tommen Baratheon, wards of the crown, unattainted, unmoved from their rooms. Their household kept, their tutors kept, the little ones' cats kept. They stay in this castle, Jon said, and they are not touched, and I want that on the roll in the words I'm saying now. He looked out over the hall. There were children on that floor once. 2 of them. Wrapped up in crimson cloaks and carried in here and put down at the foot of these steps, and every lord in this room knows the story, and a good many of you were standing here when it happened. He let it go quiet. I will not be the king who does that. Not to these. Not to anyone's. It was the only thing he said all week that the hall did not argue with. Two things happened before the sun went down. Oberyn Martell stood at a window above the outer ward and watched Jaime Lannister ride out through the King's Gate, alive, unescorted, on a good horse, and Jon coming along the gallery. Saw the Prince of Dorne's face in profile and did not go and speak to him, because there was nothing to say that would not have been a lie. And a raven came from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon had heard two things: that a Targaryen had been crowned in the Great Sept, and that Robert's children were Jaime Lannisters. He had drawn one conclusion from them. Jaime rode west that evening with the sun in his eyes. He was carrying an account of everything that had happened in that room, the questions, the verdicts, the thing he had said about the wildfire, to a man in a keep of his own who would want all of it, in order, in detail. And somewhere on that road, for the first time in 16 years, Jaime Lannister was not entirely certain whose side he was on. He did not raise a banner. He filed a document. It went out from Casterly Rock on the second day of the fourth moon, copied 900 times by every scribe in the Westerlands working in shifts, sent to every lord and every holdfast and every sept and every guildhall in the Seven Kingdoms, and it did not once use the word rebellion. It made 4 arguments, in order, and Tywin Lannister had spent 11 weeks getting the order right. First, that House Targaryen had been ended by lawful conquest in 283 Ac, its blood prescribed, its titles extinguished by the judgment of a war that every lord in the realm had fought or paid for. A king cannot resurrect what he destroyed. To seat a Targaryen is to declare that Robert's war was unjust, and to make traitors, retroactively, of every man who won it. Second, that the claim rested on a marriage for which there was no record and no living witness. The Citadel had been asked. The Citadel replied that the relevant volume of the private diaries of High Septon Maynard was not in its keeping and could not be produced. Whether it had been removed or had never existed, the Archmaesters declined to say. Third, that His High Holiness, newly raised, had considered the matter and found that no annulment could be shown, and that in the absence of a shown annulment, the union of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark was void. Fourth, and Tywin had put it last because it was the one that would be quoted, that Robert Baratheon himself had never treated the decree as complete. He had promised a great council. All 7 kingdoms, in witness, on the model of Jaehaerys. He had ridden north to fetch the boy for it. That council had never been held. The succession, therefore, was not settled. It was interrupted. And a settlement interrupted is a settlement that any lord of the realm may, in good conscience, ask to see finished. He was not a rebel, in his own telling, and he had built the telling with the same care he had built the Reign campaign. He was the last man in Westeros still defending the peace of 283. The document ended with a request for a great council to be convened at a place of the realm's choosing, and with the observation that the Warden of the West would attend it with such men as were necessary to guarantee the safety of the delegates, 20,000 of them. On the same day, and this was the part that mattered, he called in the debt. The crown owed something over 6 million dragons. Half of it was owed to Casterly Rock, and Tywin did not demand it back. He simply wrote to the Iron Bank of Braavos, and to the Faith, and to Highgarden, as a courtesy, to inform them that the Westerlands would not be extending further credit to the crown while the succession was in question, and that he trusted their own arrangements were secure. That was all. 4 lines. A king who cannot pay his men does not need to be beaten in the field. He needs only to be kept in the field long enough. Jaime came up from the yard 3 weeks later, dusty, 4 weeks on the road, and stood in his father's solar with his hands at his sides. Tywin looked at him for a long moment. They took the cloak. In front of 800 people. Yes, I have the account. He had 4 accounts. He had read them all twice. Did he strike it from your shoulders himself? He had it done. He never came down off the chair. No, Tywin turned back to the window and the long green fall of the coast. He would not. He is a boy, and he has an old northern moralist standing at his elbow telling him what the sword means, and so he did not kill you. He discarded you. Do you understand what was done to you? Jaime said nothing. He told the realm that the heir to Casterly Rock was not worth the trouble of hanging. He sent me back my own son with his honor taken off him like a coat, deliberately, on the calculation that it would wound me more than a corpse would. Tywin's voice did not change at all. It was well done. It is exactly what I would have done at his age if I had thought of it. And I did not think of it until I was 30. He asked me why I killed Aerys. Something happened in the room. He asked me in open court, and he waited for the answer, and I gave it, and 800 men heard about the wildfire. Jaime's voice had gone rough. 16 years, father. He's 16, and he asked. And you have decided that this makes him worthy. I've decided nothing. You have. Tywin turned round. You have decided, and you have not yet noticed. That is how it is done, Jaime, not with a bribe, with a courtesy that costs him nothing and buys him a Lannister. He let that sit. You will command the eastern column, he said, and I will not ask you again whether your sword is mine, because if I have to ask, I already have my answer. The Reach was the war. Everything else was ground. 60,000 swords and every grain of wheat in Westeros, and Mace Tyrell in the middle of it doing what Tyrells do, which is wait to be bid for. Tywin bid. He offered Highgarden the marriage. Joffrey was at the wall and worthless, but there were cousins, and there was Casterly Rock itself, and in the end there was gold, which is what Mace Tyrell actually understood. The crown offered the throne. Margaery Tyrell went to King's Landing in the 5th moon as her father's negotiator, not as a bride, which told Tywin more about the state of the Reach than any spy had managed in 2 months. They were still weighing it. That was the danger. Not that they would refuse him, but that they would take their time, and a Tyrell taking his time was a granary staying shut. It is not the swords, he told Kevin, over the map at the Golden Tooth. Let them keep the swords. The war is settled by whoever can feed a host through an autumn, and there is one house in Westeros that grows enough to do it, and everyone in this tent is waiting for the wrong thing to arrive. Then Stannis moved, and Tywin learned that the boy had made an enemy he did not need. The letters had gone out from Dragonstone in the same week as his own, the parentage of Robert's children, laid out in full, and the observation that the Iron Throne was now held by a Targaryen, crowned by the men who had murdered the last one. Stannis Baratheon was not a claimant Tywin feared. 5,000 men and a rock. What Tywin noted, and turned over and understood, was the other thing in the report. The Red Woman had left him. She had gone to the boy, sailed to the Crown's camp uninvited and been received, and Stannis Baratheon had been in a room in Dragonstone when the news came, and had not been seen for 2 days. A man who has lost a war is dangerous. A man who has lost the thing that told him he was chosen is a different animal entirely. Stannis opened the mouth of the Blackwater in the 6th moon with everything he had, at the exact hour the Crown's host was committed 400 miles west. It was, Tywin conceded, the best timing anyone displayed in the entire war. He would not be trapped at the Golden Tooth. Every outline of the campaign, the crowns, his own bannermans, the songs that would be written afterward, had him holding the pass and being ground against it. He had read the same histories they had. He declined. He came down out of the hills in the 5th moon and went east into the Riverlands, 20,000 men moving fast and light, straight at the Crown's supply. And he took Harrenhal's road and sat astride the whole eastern half of the war before the boys' council had finished arguing about it. That was move 1, and it was correct, and it worked. The boy's answer was not a countermarch. He bought the Reach. Whatever was offered, and Tywin never learned the full price, though, he understood, a crown was in it. And a promise about grain tariffs that no king would have made if he could afford not to. Highgarden closed the western road in the 7th moon. Not a wagon on the ocean road, not a cart out of Highgarden on the Gold Road, nothing moving west out of the richest country in the world. And then, while Tywin sat in the Riverlands with the Crown's supply lines under his hand and nothing to eat off, the Golden Tooth fell behind him. 6,000 northern horse, with 12,000 foot coming up behind them, under Robb Stark, who was 17 years old and who had gone round through the hills instead of through the pass, and who took a fortress designed to stop an army coming east from an army that had already gone. Casterly Rock was cut from its own host in a single afternoon. Tywin stood over the map at Acorn Hall for a long time after the Raven came. He did not outgeneral me, he said at last. Kevin said nothing. He starved me. He is 16 years old and he has never won a battle and he did not try to. He read a ledger. Tywin put a marker down. In 30 years, no one has done that to me. I have been outfought twice, and I have never once been outsupplied. They fought at the Blackwater Rush on the 11th day of the 8th moon, on ground the crown chose, because by then there was no ground left that Tywin could choose. The Reach held the center. 60,000 men who had never intended to fight anybody, and who did not have to do anything except stand, and stood. The Northern Horse came in from the west, out of the sun, at the 4th hour. Tywin Lannister sat his horse on the high ground and watched it happen, and did not look away from any of it. He had been in 8 battles and won 7, and he understood by the 2nd hour that this was an argument he had already lost on paper in a room 3 months ago, and that everything happening below him was merely the reading of the judgment. The White Ravens came over the field at some point in the afternoon. They went east, high up, a dozen of them, pale against the smoke. The citadel telling the realm that the summer was over at last, 9 years of it, and that autumn had come. Nobody on that field looked up. 2 hours later the crown's line closed, and it was finished. They brought him to a tent, unbound, and put a chair in it, because the boy had given specific instructions about that, and men repeated them afterward. Dorne had come up in the 7th moon, 10,000 spears, and had asked for nothing on arrival, which every commander in the crown's army found remarkable, and only 2 men understood. Gregor Clegane had been taken alive at the ford. Oberyn Martell had been 3 days at that work, and was not finished. The boy came in alone. He looked at Tywin Lannister for a while, and Tywin looked back at him, and saw Rhaegar in the bones and nothing else at all, and understood that there had never been anything he could have offered. "My Lord of Lannister." The boy's voice was quiet and northern and entirely level. "You've had my ruling. I'll give you the reasons, since you're owed them. I am not owed anything. Do not pretend I am." "No," the boy accepted it. "Then this. Casterly Rock stands. Your brother's line keeps it, and the Westerlands keep their lands, and no house that followed you is attainted, or broken, or sung about. I'll not end a house. That's the thing you did. And I've read what it cost the realm for 40 years afterward. You are ending mine. I'm ending you." He said it the way another man might read a weather report. "Dorne was promised 2 heads in a room in the Red Keep before I was king. I gave my word without a date on it, and this is the date. It's not justice, and I'll not call it justice in front of you. It's a debt, and I'm paying it, and you of all men in this world can understand a debt." He turned at the flap. "They'll say I did it for Elia Martell's children," he said. "I did it because I'd rather owe Dorne nothing than owe you anything." And then Tywin Lannister was alone in a tent with a chair, and he did not think about the boy, or the battle, or his son riding somewhere east with the last of the Eastern Column, or the 6 million dragons that would now never be collected. He thought about a hall in Casterly Rock when he was 9 years old, and a room full of his father's bannermen laughing at Tytos Lannister to his face. 49 years. 2 houses put in the ground. A daughter made a queen, and a war won for a man who never thanked him. He had spent all of it on one thing, and it was not gold, and it was not the rock, and it had never once been his children. They will not laugh at the name. The field afterward was very quiet. Autumn came down over the Blackwater in the last hour of light, and the grass was flattened for 2 miles in the shape of what had stood on it, and men moved slowly along the lines with lanterns doing the arithmetic of the dead. Far off to the east, at the mouth of the river, 5,000 men in Baratheon colors stood on a beach beside their ships and watched the smoke going up, 4 days too late, with nothing left to do but decide. Stannis Baratheon decided on the beach, and it took him 11 days. The letter came up the Blackwater under a peace banner, and it was 4 sentences long, and it did not contain the word surrender anywhere in it. He would come to King's Landing. He would come armed, and he would come with his fleet at anchor where he could see it. And he would come only if the crown convened the council that Robert Baratheon had promised and never held, all 7 kingdoms, in witness, before the year turned, because that was the thing the West had gone to war over, and if it was not settled now, it would be gone to war over again in 10 years by somebody else. Jon read it twice and put it down. "He's right," he said. He's right, Ned agreed. That's the difficulty with him. He has been right about everything for 16 years, and it has never once done him any good. The Great Council was convened at King's Landing in the 9th moon of 299 Ac, 16 years late, in the first autumn of the boy's life. It took 9 days. Every great house sat, and the faith sat, and 41 lesser lords with the standing to speak sat. And Tywin Lannister's document was read into the record in full because Jon insisted on it over the objection of half the room, read out, all 4 arguments, in the dead man's own words, so that nobody could ever say afterward that the case had not been heard. The Citadel sent an archmaester who confirmed, under oath, that the volume was missing, and that he could not say why. Ned Stark gave his evidence and was cross-examined for 6 hours by a septon from Oldtown and did not change a word of it. Stannis Baratheon voted against. He stood up in front of the entire realm and said that he did not believe a marriage no living man had witnessed, that he had been the lawful heir of his brother's body under every custom the 7 kingdoms had ever kept, and that he had been passed over by a drunk in a room with a dead girl's name in his mouth. Then he sat down, and when the Count went against him, heavily, the North and the Reach, and Dorne and the Vale, and the Riverlands, and the shattered West all one way, Stannis Baratheon got up a second time and crossed the floor and knelt, because the council was lawful, and because he had spent his whole life saying that the rule was the rule, and he was not going to stop being that man on the day it cost him something. It was the only moment in 9 days that the Hall did not know what to do with. Jon named him Master of Ships and Lord of Dragonstone in perpetuity, and Stannis accepted the first, and observed that he already had the second. Renly he settled in an afternoon. The Summerhall lands went back into Storm's End's ledger, every acre of the 9,000, with the crown keeping the ruin itself and the title that went with it. Renly got the revenue, and Jon got the name, which was all either of them had ever actually wanted. "You could have kept it," Renly said, signing. "I'd not have gone to war over a field. You'd have brought it up at every council for 30 years. "Yes," said Renly, delighted. "I would have." He took the Master of Law's chair and was good at it, which surprised everybody except Jon, who had watched him charm a hostile hall for 4 days running during the council. Jaime Lannister had surrendered the eastern column at the Blackwater without a blow, on the grounds that the war was over and there was nothing left to command. He was pardoned. He was not restored, the White Cloak was gone, and the Rock had gone to Kevin's Line, and no part of it was coming back. He wrote once, from Casterly Rock, 3 months later. It was a single line, and it was not warm, and Jon kept it in the chest with the others. Ask the next one too. The Reach wanted an answer before the leaves finished turning, and there was no honest way to put it off any longer. He took it in the small council chamber with 4 people, and the door shut, because the thing was not a romance, and pretending otherwise would have cost him something later. "Margaery Tyrell," Ned said. "Say the case against." "There isn't one." "That's the case against." Ned pushed the letter across the table. "Highgarden closed the western road for you in the 7th moon and it won the war, and Mace Tyrell will remind you of it at every council for the next 20 years, and his lady mother will be in this castle inside a month, and your household will be full of Tyrells before your first child is weaned. They will spend a generation trying to run you. And you'll be alive to be run." Ned's mouth moved slightly. "There's 60,000 swords and every granary in Westeros in that girl's dowry, and it is the first autumn in 9 years, and the realm has been at war for a summer, and you have soldiers to pay, and a debt to Braavos, and half the crownlands have not sown anything. Then, it's Margaery Tyrell. It's Margaery Tyrell." He wrote to Sunspear the same afternoon about Arianne Martell, in his own hand, because Doran was owed it, and because it was true, that he had considered it, that Doran had come when it was not obliged to, that no marriage in the 7 kingdoms would have pleased him more, or fed a realm less. Doran's reply came in 9 days, and was gracious and cold and entirely correct, and Jon kept it. The other one he did in a corridor, badly, and it went better than it deserved to. Sansa had come south with the northern party after the war for the settlements. She was 15 and taller, and she had the whole of her mother's carriage now, and she found him on the gallery above the outer ward and stood beside him a while without saying anything. "They talked about it," she said at last. "At Winterfell. Before all of it. 2 of the stewards. And I heard them. I know they did. It won't happen." "No," she nodded, looking out at the yard. "Because we're cousins. Because we're cousins, and the faith was bought against me once already and would be again, and because half the realm still thinks the North took this throne with 300 men in a warehouse." He turned to look at her. "And because they'd have made you a Stark hostage in a southern castle and called it a crown, and I'd have watched it happen from 6 feet away for 40 years. Sansa was quiet for a moment. "Would you have said yes, if none of it were true?" "I don't know. That's a better answer than yes." She smiled, and it was almost the smile she had practiced at 11, and not quite. "She's clever, they say. Margaery, very good, you'll need it." She put her hand on his arm briefly and went to find her sister, and that was the whole of it, and neither of them was ever unkind about it afterward. Ned would not stay. They argued about it twice. The second time Jon used everything he had, the Braavosi negotiation, the Crownland sowing. The fact that there was not one man on the small council who had not been bought at some point by somebody, and Ned Stark heard all of it out and then said the thing he had clearly decided on the road home from the Blackwater. "I came south in 283 to do one thing, and I did it, and I came south again to do it a second time, and it's done." He was packing a chest himself, which he would not let a servant do. "If I stay, every lord who comes into this hall for the next 10 years looks past you and finds me. You'll be the boy the Starks put on the chair until the day I die." That's not a reason. It's the reason. And there's another. He shut the lid. "Robb has been Warden of the North for a year and a half with his mother doing half of it. Bran is in the chair Robb had made for him and has not been out of the castle since he woke, and Rickon is 6, and I have not been in that hall since before any of it started. Ned, I'm going home, Jon." They said goodbye in the yard at first light, with 60 Northmen mounted behind him and Ghost sitting in the gate. Neither of them said one word about the throne. They talked about the crypts, that the lower level was flooding again, and Luwin wanted stone brought up from the quarry, and that Ned meant to have it done before the frosts. They talked about Arya, who was going north and had made her feelings known at length. Ned said that Robb had written that the direwolves had whelped in the spring, and there were 2 he did not know what to do with. Then Ned Stark took him by the back of the neck the way he had done in a crypt when Jon was 8, and held on for a moment and got on his horse. "Ride well," Jon said. Aye, that was all of it. Jon stood in the yard until the gate closed. Ned had told him the night before. He had come up to the solar late and stood by the fire and said, without preamble, that there was one thing left, and he would say it once, and would not discuss it afterward. He told him what Lyanna Stark said in that tower. Not the arrangement, not the annulment, not the succession, not the argument about the face, none of the parts that had been in decrees and rolls and other men's mouths for 16 years. The words she used, what her hand did, what she was afraid of at the end, and what she made her brother promise, and what it had cost Eddard Stark to keep it in a castle full of people who thought they knew who Jon was. It took less than 2 minutes. Then Ned put a hand on his shoulder and went out and shut the door, and Jon sat in the chair by the fire for a long time and did not go to bed at all. The letter from the wall came at the end of the autumn's second moon. Maester Aemon's hand had been failing for years, and it was worse now, the letters going uphill, some of them dictated and some of them not, the whole thing written by a man of 100 and more who could not see the page. 9 years of them. The first had been about dragons. Jon had been 8, and had asked whether it was true that a Targaryen had once been offered a crown and said no, and how he had done it, and whether it had been hard. The old man had answered every one. This one was short. "You have asked me since you were a boy what it cost me to refuse. I could not answer while you were free to refuse it too. You are not free now, so I may say it plainly. It cost me nothing at all. That is the part no one believes. I was a maester and I had made my vows, and the crown was simply not mine to take. And I said so. And I slept that night. The price came after. 66 years of hearing what the realm did without me, in a cold room at the end of the world, knowing that every hour of it was mine, and I had given it away lawfully. You took what I set down. Do not spend your life asking whether you were right. That question has no floor. Ask instead whether you are still doing it well. That one can be answered every morning. I have wanted these 9 years to see your face. I am told it is a northern one. It is a comfort to me that there is one of us left, and that he was raised by people who loved him, which is more than any Targaryen in 100 years can say. Do not come to the wall. You will want to. It is 900 leagues, and you are needed where you are, and I will not be here. Aemon, Jon read it 4 times. He put it in the chest with Doran Martell's letter and Jaime's one line, and the copy of Robert's last decree with his mother's name in it, and he answered it that night. And the raven left in the morning, and it arrived, and there is no record of an answer. The other raven from the wall came 11 days later, and nobody at court took it seriously. It was from the Lord Commander. It said that the watch was under 900 men across 19 castles, that 6 rangings had gone out beyond the wall in the past year, and 2 had come back, that the wildling host was moving south in numbers no one had ever recorded, and was not raiding, which was the part the old man kept returning to. They were not raiding. They were running. And then, in the last paragraph, in plainer language than the rest of it, an account of 2 men who had come back to Castle Black dead, and had got up. Baelish smiled at the table. Not unkindly. Grand Maester Pycelle's replacement said that the Watch had been writing letters of this character since the reign of Aegon III, and that the numbers were probably true and the rest of it probably was not, and that the North's own warden had not sent a companion letter, which was telling. The Master of Coin observed that the crown owed the Iron Bank better than 1,000,000 dragons, and the faith near as much again, and that neither would wait on wildlings. Jon sat and listened to all of it, and did not argue with any of it, because every man at that table was being reasonable, and there was no fact in his hand that would move them. Send them the men, he said. Whatever's left of the pardons from the war, the ones we're feeding in the black cells, send them north with grain and steel, and put Sir Dennis Mallister's request from the Shadow Tower through as well, and put it on the roll that I've done it, and that it was not the council's advice. They wrote it down. It cost the crown very little, and made no one angry, which is how a king gets something done that nobody believes in. The Red Woman was waiting in the gallery outside when the council rose. She had been in the Red Keep since the summer, and Jon had spoken to her 4 times, and had not once known what to do about her. She had come to him uninvited, in a war camp, and had asked for nothing, and had said something to Stannis Baratheon's face in the yard at their only meeting that had made the hardest man in Westeros walk away. You had a letter from the wall, she said. Everyone at that table had it. They did not read it. She was looking past him at a sconce. May I tell you what I see, or will you send me away again? Tell me, Snow. Melisandre said it without any performance in it at all, which was the thing that unsettled him, because he had been told to expect the other. Every time I look for the champion I am shown Snow. I looked for years, and thought the fire was withholding. It was not. It was answering, and I did not like the answer, so I went and found a man with a straight back and a claim, and I decided he was what I had been shown. And now? Now I have stopped deciding. She met his eyes. There is a war coming, and it is not the one you fought this year, and you will fight it in the dark with too few men, and I do not know whether you win. I would have told you that you win 6 months ago. That is what I was for. Jon looked at her for a long moment. I don't believe you, he said. No, Melisandre agreed. Not yet. She inclined her head and went, and Jon stood in the gallery with the sconce burning behind him, and put the whole of it out of his mind, and it stayed out for 9 days, and then it did not. The hall emptied at dusk. He stayed. The torches went down one by one, and the servants finished, and went, and by the 7th hour Jon was alone in the throne room of the Red Keep, sitting on the Iron Throne with his hands on the arms of it, and the whole black tangle of it around him. He had turned 17 a fortnight before, and nobody had marked it, including him. He had a wedding in the spring, and a debt he could not pay, and 900 men holding a wall 300 miles long. He got up and went down the steps. At the bottom he turned round and looked back at it. The thing itself, up on its days in the dark, a heap of swords beaten flat by a man on a dragon 300 years ago. Men had died for it in this room in living memory. 2 children had been laid out on the stone in front of it, wrapped in crimson, 20 feet from where he was standing. This was never the real seat of power, he said. The North is. Nobody answered him. There was nobody there. He walked the length of the hall, and the doors were open at the end, and Ghost was sitting in them. Upright, white, facing away from him. Not at the yard, not at the gate. North, the wind came in off the black water through the open doors, and it was cold, properly cold, the first cold in 9 years in a southern hall, and Jon stood beside his wolf in the doorway, and felt it come down out of a dark sky onto his face, and did not move, and let it. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.